The very short, because this is what you guys care about the most, the very short version of this is that the town council voted to not paint lines on Long Mountain Road. Now, I gave you my thoughts on this matter. Chris Cosgrove was the only dissenting vote. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. Esposito was not in attendance, and neither was Sal Rankowitz, so it was 5 to 1. In favor of Katie Francis's motion to not paint those lines along Mountain Road. Again, I've given you my thoughts on the matter, right? It seems to me like the safety concern is at best you're splitting a hair to say that it's safer to paint the lines on that road than it would be to not paint the lines. But we do know that it's going to cost money. We do know it's going to cost money. We do know it's going to take time. We do know we're going to have to buy paint. We do know we're going to have to pay operators to go out there and spray the paint. And again, this isn't the town's money. This isn't the town council's money. This isn't the Board of Finance's money. This isn't DPW's money. This is your money. This is my money, right? So like I've said before, especially because this is taken not in a voluntary exchange like you would at Taylor's, at the local hardware store, because this is taken with, at the very least, the threat of violence, this money needs to be handled extremely delicately. Extremely delicately. And when you're running into a situation where the safety concern, as far as painting the line is concerned, is a splitting of hairs at best in favor of painting the lines, to me, screw it. Screw it. The road's already there. The road's already there. People are already driving down that road, have already been driving down that road for almost a year now. Screw it. Don't paint the lines. Now, there was a legal concern. There was a legal concern because Randy DeBella did mention that there was a legal concern as to the liability that the town would expose themselves to in superseding the traffic authority's ruling to paint the lines. Now, of course, if they're going to paint the lines, they have to put a double down. So it's either 2 lines or no lines, right? And again, if this all seems like, town politics again, if this all seems like, why are we talking about painting lines on a road? I'm on board. We'll come back to that. But this is all setting things up. So folks know, so folks understand better. This was, Town Attorney Randy DeBella was not there on Monday night. So in his stead was John Tower, who was representing the firm of Kramer and Anderson, who represent the town as their official attorneys. Randy DeBella is simply the human being that acts as the face of the contractor, who is the town attorney, who is in this case Kramer and Anderson. He wasn't available to be there because guess what? Some people have lives. So John Tower was filling in his stead, and the mayor was kind enough to get a written statement from Randy DeBella, opining on the liability concern when it came to the painting or non-painting of those lines. It seems to me, if I may characterize the thing before you hear it, which is probably unfair, it seems to me like the attorneys believe that it is a really, really, really dubious concern of liability in this case, though it may not be zero. So this is the mayor reading attorney. This is the mayor and town attorney, John Tower, speaking on the matter.
So there was some conjecture, both in public participation, about our town attorney, Randy DeBella, not being here. So I'd asked Randy, because he's not going to be here, could he write a letter? Which he did. Okay? So Attorney Tower, who's representing us, thank you, John, could you speak a little bit about the letter?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Just quickly, this letter prepared by Randy after a careful review of the scenic road ordinance provides simply that the traffic authority does not have exclusive authority or jurisdiction over this issue, and that the town council retains the ability by motion to basically adopt a policy to not stripe this road. And that's because the traffic authority under its ordinance is not given exclusive authority in this particular area. And as to liability concerns, I'm not going to repeat the analysis here, but Randy DeBella basically points out that we reserve the ability to protect the town with governmental immunity. I don't need to get into that. That's a complex area, but we don't think we have any erosion of our liability defenses if we do not stripe the road.
So in very, very short, The town attorneys don't believe that there's any serious concern for liability there. And again, Andrew, who has been presenting in public comment on the thing, and first things first, folks, if you ever wanted to see how process works correctly, you do things the way Andrew did. You present the actual data and let the town council make their decision, right? Andrew did a great job of saying, here's what the research says in my favor. And then he would go to the town council members and hand them packets. And he would read, a prepared speech, right? So that he knows he can stay under 5 minutes, and went through the proper authorities. He went to the traffic authority. He went to all of these other meetings that are outside of the town council. Now, I also mentioned too that when it came to the Chernisky Road Bridge project, we didn't hear a peep from anyone until the town council a few years ago was set to make a decision on this matter. And then all of a sudden things came out. And then all of a sudden the folks came out of the woodworks. So just so folks understand too what John Tower was saying, and I'll present the legalese. I don't know that I'm going to have time to really get into the legalese as to what he meant by qualified immunity, what he meant by the general immunity. But this is what this is the short version of that legalese to explain what he means by that.
The point is, it's a discretionary function. Yeah. And when you fall into that category, you preserve your governmental immunity defenses.
Got it. Okay.
Discretionary acts are inherently those that are defendable under governmental immunity.
So what's happening here is the town council is going to supersede a decision by the traffic authority. But because this is a discretionary decision, and this isn't a statutory decision, they're using their discretion as councilmen who are elected on that value judgment we talked about to say, you know what, the safety concern here is at best the splitting of a hair. Mike Nahum talked about that at the meeting. So since we know for sure we're going to have to spend a good amount of money, let's not spend the money. Let's save the taxpayer some dollars, and let's move on. Now, Chris Cosgrove was the one dissenting vote. In very short, his objections are basically just something along the lines of, although the concern for liability might actually be dubious and might be extremely limited, it's non-zero, and that his standard for that liability concern is zero. I don't think that's an appropriate threshold, considering there's no such thing as zero risk, and this is basically nothing more than a risk calculation. But that's how Chris Cosgrove voted in the moment on that. Again, he was still at least citing basically his role as a councilman in eliciting a value judgment. Some of you are going to agree with him. Some of you are going to disagree with him. Some of you are going to say the safety concern is significantly in favor of one thing and not in favor of the other. Now, there was also talk in public comment about research that shows that it was more safe, or research that suggests that the previous research on it being less safe to not paint the lines was bunk, which was great because now we have research from both sides. But again, to me, from what I've read of the research, to be really short, because I don't want this thing to run 2 hours long, right? If you guys want me to go over the research, we can go over the research. But to me, the research doesn't seem to be significantly and heavily in favor of one or the other. It seems to me to be a splitting of the hairs. So I know for a fact it's going to cost us a bunch of money. I don't know for a fact if it's going to be safer to paint the lines than to not paint the lines, or vice versa. But I know for a fact it's going to cost us money. And at this point, DPW needs to have a decision made. And here is that was town council instructing them to basically instruct. Katie's motion was to instruct the town council, to instruct the DPW not to paint the lines, in short. And that's what was decided upon. And in this case, I think the process actually worked correctly. I think that there was time for introspection, and people did that. I think that the town council, in voting the way that they did, in basically in line with what John Tower said, was them knowing their place, was them not saying, I know better than the attorneys what that risk calculation is, or what that liability risk is. That's John Tower. That's them. Even in the case of Chris Cosgrove, that's Chris Cosgrove relying on John Tower and Attorney DeBella's assessment of the liability risk. And, Chris Cosgrove saying, well, they have admitted it's non-zero, therefore, right? That's not Chris Cosgrove saying the risk is greater than what they're implying. That's Chris Cosgrove saying, I'm going based off of the risk that they are implying, and we're making a decision based on what these attorneys say. Now, if you can no longer trust the town attorneys, if you can no longer trust our representation over at Kramer and Anderson to do their jobs and to make these risk calculations, number one, present information, evidence your claim. And number two, then the only job of the legislative arm of our governing body is to terminate that to terminate that contract, to no longer have them represent that interest, to no longer be the experts we rely on in the room. Just like with DPW, which we will get to in a moment. But the point is, again, and Katie Francis explained this at the end of the meeting, Andrew wasn't saying he knows better than DPW. What Andrew was doing was saying, here's some research that says don't paint the lines for this exact case. And I'm going to rely on this research. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. That's a perfectly reasonable thing as a town councilman to say, well, I mean, the research is here and I'm literate. Therefore, I can read the research and the research seems to say X, Y, Z. Just like the town attorney's opinion says X, Y, Z. And if the town attorney's opinion had said, whoa, hold on, time out, slow your roll. If you supersede the traffic authority, there's a major risk of liability concern here, right? If they said that we're definitely going to lose our asses when we get sued because it's going to happen because somebody got into an accident, then I think that this entire calculus completely changes. I don't think that Chris Cosgrove would have been lone wolfing that night. I think there would have been a lot of votes the other way.